2 boarding passes, 1 new life. Ready to leave everything behind?
Only nervous about my mother. Everything else already feels like home. Of all the surgeons in this city, it had to be you.
Believe whatever helps you sleep. I have a patient to save.
Perhaps stepping aside would be wise, Doctor, for everyone's sake.
Mrs. Kang requested me herself. I intend to keep that promise.
The doors of Empire Memorial Hospital burst open at 6:42 in the morning, and Dr. Amara Lawson did not know the next patient would tear her whole world open again. A code call rang through her pager. Cardiac arrest. VIP admission. She ran toward Trauma Bay 3, gloves snapping into place, her mind sharp the way 8 years of surgery had trained it to be. Then she saw the name on the chart. Grace Kang. Her heart stopped for one full second, because the last time she heard that name, she was standing in an airport terminal, watching the only man she had ever loved disappear through a gate without saying goodbye. 8 years since Empire City International Airport. 8 years since she watched Ethan Kang walk away like every promise between them had been a lie only she believed. She had built a career out of that pain, rebuilding her hands to save lives instead of waiting for one man to come back for hers. Now his mother's heart was failing on a gurney nearby. The double doors swung open again. There he was. Ethan Kang, older, sharper, dressed like a man who ran an empire, frozen in the hallway with the same eyes that once told her she was the only home he needed. Neither of them said a word. The machines kept beeping. Somewhere behind that silence, an old secret was about to wake up. Ethan crossed the hallway in 4 long strides, ignoring everyone except her. "Of all the surgeons in this city," he said, his voice cold enough to freeze the room, "it had to be you." Amara did not flinch. She had learned long ago not to give people the satisfaction of watching her break. "I didn't request this case, Mr. Kang," she said evenly. "Your mother did. Personally." Confusion broke through his anger for a second before the wall came back up. "My mother doesn't know anything about you," he said. "She knows exactly what I let her believe, that you took the money and disappeared." The words landed like a slap in front of the nursing station. A resident lowered her eyes. A nurse pretended to check a chart. The old shame rose in Amara's chest, the same shame she carried through that airport 8 years ago, and for one terrible moment she almost explained herself. But she had promised her mother she never would. "Believe whatever helps you sleep at night," she said quietly. "Right now I have a patient to save." She walked past him without looking back, and it took everything she had not to let her hands shake. If you've ever had to stay silent to protect someone you love, even when it cost you everything, you already understand what Amara is carrying into that operating room. Before we go further, tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching this from tonight. And if stories like this one speak to you, make sure you're subscribed to Empire City Romance Stories, because what Amara discovers next changes everything you think you know about that airport. 8 years earlier, on a bright Tuesday morning, Amara stood at Gate 14 of Empire City International Airport holding 2 boarding passes and a heart full of plans. She and Ethan were supposed to fly to Seoul together, to start a life neither family had approved of but both of them had chosen anyway. She remembered the color of his tie. She remembered the way he laughed at something she said 30 minutes before he simply vanished. One phone call. One quiet conversation near the window with a woman in a cream coat and a small pearl brooch, a woman Amara didn't recognize. Then Ethan was gone, boarding a different flight alone, without one word to her. Amara never told anyone what really happened in those 20 minutes. Not her mother, not her closest friend, not even herself most days. She folded her unused boarding pass into a small square and kept it in the bottom of a drawer for 8 years, the way some people keep grief they aren't ready to bury. Now that same feeling was rising again under fluorescent hospital lights. Some loops, she realized, do not close. They just wait for you to walk back into the room. By 9 that morning, the hospital's board chair was already outside the surgical wing, flanked by a tall, silver-haired man in an impeccable gray suit. Preston Hale had been the Kang family's fixer for over 20 years, and he had a talent for making threats sound like polite suggestions. "Dr. Lawson," he said, "the family wants the most appropriate surgeon on a case this sensitive. Given your history with the family, perhaps stepping aside would be wise." Amara studied him. There was something too familiar in the way he said history. Mrs. Kang requested me by name, she said. Are you overruling your employer's wishes, Mr. Hale? A flicker crossed his face. Of course not, he said smoothly. I only meant to protect everyone involved. He walked away before she could ask what he thought needed protecting. Inside the ICU, Grace Kang's monitor showed a heart rhythm growing more unstable by the hour, a failing valve that would need replacing within 48 hours or she would not survive the week. Amara reviewed the imaging 3 times, forcing her hand steady, forcing years of training to override years of hurt. She would not let an old wound decide who lived and who died on her table. That evening, Ethan found her alone in the family consultation room. Why did you really leave that day? He asked, closing the door behind him, his voice rawer than before. I didn't leave, Ethan, Amara said quietly. You did. I stood at that gate until they closed the doors. That's not what I was told. Then you were told wrong. My mother said you called it off, Ethan said. That you wanted a different life. I called your apartment for a week. Your number was disconnected. Amara's throat tightened. Her number had changed the day after the airport, on her mother's insistence, for reasons she still could not say aloud. I never spoke to your mother that day, she said carefully. Confusion flickered across his face, buried under old hurt. Don't, he said. Don't rewrite 8 years because it's convenient now that she's on a table you control. I have never used a patient for leverage in my life, Amara said, her voice shaking. I've spent 8 years becoming someone who saves people, not someone who destroys them. She walked out before the tears reached her eyes, leaving him with a question he wasn't ready to ask his mother yet, and a memory of a woman near a window he had never told anyone about either. Here's a question worth sitting with. If the person who broke your heart was lied to just as much as you were, does that change what happened, or does the pain still count the same? Type your honest answer below. And if you want to see exactly what happened in that airport 8 years ago, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because the truth Amara is about to uncover changes everything. Late that night, reviewing Grace Kang's admission file, Amara found something she was never meant to see. Tucked inside an old folder of records transferred from a private clinic 8 years ago was a handwritten note, the ink faded but legible, addressed to a woman named Rosa Delgado, owner of a small restaurant on 5th Avenue, a woman Amara recognized instantly as her own mother. The note referenced a loan, a threatened lawsuit, a deadline. The date matched the week of the airport. Amara's hands went cold. She remembered now, with sudden clarity, the woman by the window at gate 14, who had pulled her aside for 90 seconds while Ethan took a phone call. A woman in a cream coat and a pearl brooch, speaking in a calm voice that made every threat sound like a kindness. Come with me for a moment, dear. Grace Kang. It had been Grace at the window the entire time, not a stranger. She had threatened to bury Amara's mother in legal debt, unless Amara walked away that day without one word of explanation, and told Ethan the opposite story, that Amara had chosen to leave him. Both of them had spent 8 years grieving a version of the truth that never existed. Amara sat alone in the records room a long time, the note trembling in her hand, before she finally understood what had been taken from her. By morning, the hospital board convened an emergency meeting. Preston argued forcefully that Dr. Lawson be replaced, to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Then Grace Kang, barely strong enough to sit upright, asked for the meeting to be brought to her room instead. I did not request Dr. Lawson by accident, she told the board, her voice thin but firm. She has the best outcomes in this hospital for a procedure this delicate. I intend to survive this surgery, and I intend for her to be the one who makes sure I do. Preston's jaw tightened, but he said nothing further. Later, alone in the hallway, Ethan caught up to Amara. Why would she insist on you? He said, more to himself than to her. Unless she already knew exactly who you were. It wasn't quite a question. Amara held his gaze, aware the ground beneath their shared history had shifted, though neither of them could yet see how far the crack ran. Ask your mother, she said simply. When she's strong enough to answer honestly. She stepped into the elevator, and for the first time in 8 years, it was Ethan left standing with unanswered questions of his own. That night, Amara sat in the surgeon's lounge with her closest friend, Dr. Naomi Price, the only person she had ever come close to telling the full truth. You found proof, Naomi said quietly. You could show him. You could show everyone. And ruin a dying woman's reputation on her way into surgery? Ruin the last thing my mother has left, her privacy. Amara shook her head. I've carried this 8 years. I can carry it 2 more days. Naomi stilled her friend's hands. Carrying it alone almost cost you your whole life once already, she said gently. Don't let it cost you this chance too. Down the hall, unseen by either of them, Ethan sat alone in the waiting area, turning something small and worn between his fingers, a torn boarding pass stub he had kept folded in his wallet for 8 years without fully understanding why. He had told himself it was a reminder never to trust that easily again. Staring now at a woman's handwriting he suddenly could not stop thinking about, he was beginning to wonder if it had always meant something closer to hope. At 4 a.m., Grace Kang's monitors alarmed. Her failing valve was worse than predicted, and a scheduled procedure became an emergency Amara had to perform within hours. As the team scrambled to prep the ore, Preston intercepted her outside the scrub room, his composure cracking. You don't understand what's at stake, he said, low and urgent. If this goes wrong, and people ask why the family insisted on the one surgeon with a personal connection to them, questions will follow. Questions Mrs. Kang would not want answered. Are you asking me to fail, Mr. Hale? Amara said flatly. Or to walk away so someone less qualified can try instead? I'm asking you to think about what you're protecting, he snapped. I know what I'm protecting, she said. My patient. She pushed past him into the scrub room, her hands finally steady, because beneath the anger and old grief, she had already made her decision. Whatever Grace Kang had done to her, Amara refused to become someone who let a person die out of revenge. We're seconds away from the truth Amara has protected for 8 years finally reaching the surface, and I want your prediction before we get there. Does Ethan find out from his mother, or does Amara have to tell him herself? Drop your prediction in the comments right now, and if you don't want to miss how this unfolds, make sure that subscribe button is already pressed, because what Grace Kang says next changes everything for everyone in that operating room. Before the anesthesiologist administered the final sedative, Grace Kang asked for one private minute with her surgeon. The room emptied. Machines hummed low around them. I know you found the note, Grace whispered. I saw how you looked at me this morning. Amara said nothing, waiting. 8 years ago, my husband's company was 6 weeks from bankruptcy, Grace continued. The only thing keeping Kang Horizon Group alive was a merger with a family who made it clear Ethan's marriage prospects needed to stay. In their words, appropriate. I convinced myself I was protecting my son's future, his company for 100 employees, a legacy his father built from nothing. So I found the fastest way to end things quietly. I found your mother's restaurant and her loan and I used it. Her eyes glistened, but she did not look away. I told myself it was necessary. I told your Ethan a story so he'd stop chasing you. I told you a threat so you'd stop waiting for him. I've watched my son build an empire and still come home to an empty house for 8 years. And some nights I'm not sure whose punishment I was truly protecting him from. She reached weakly for Amara's hand. I'm not asking you to forgive me before I go under. I'm asking you to save my life because whatever I did to you, I never doubted you were the best surgeon for this. I chose you because I've always known exactly who you are. The anesthesiologist returned. Grace Kang's eyes closed, and the truth she had carried for 8 years finally belonged to someone else. The surgery took 4 hours and 11 minutes. Amara's hands moved with a precision that had nothing to do with anger, and everything to do with a promise she'd made herself long ago, that she would never let her pain decide who deserved to live. When she stepped out of the OR and pulled off her mask, Ethan was waiting exactly where she had left him. She's stable, Amara said. The valve repair held. She should recover fully. Ethan studied her face like he was searching for something he had missed for 8 years. She told you everything before she went under, didn't she? He said quietly. It wasn't a guess. Amara nodded once. Then she told me an hour ago too, Ethan said, his voice rough. From a hospital bed, half sedated. Because apparently that was the only moment she could finally say it out loud. He stepped closer. You saved the life of the woman who destroyed ours. And you never told anyone not to punish me, not to defend yourself. I wasn't protecting her, Amara said. I was protecting the only thing your mother never took from me, who I decided to become. Down the corridor, Preston Hale watched from a distance, his composure completely gone, aware that the quiet arrangement protecting the family's version of the truth had just ended in a hospital hallway at 2 in the morning. 3 weeks later, Ethan found Amara in the hospital garden, the place she went when she needed quiet. He didn't reach for her hand. He simply sat beside her, a careful distance between them. I need to say this properly, he said. Not as an excuse, just the truth. He told her plainly what his mother had done, and what he now understood it had cost her. The restaurant nearly lost, the silence she carried alone for 8 years, the number she was forced to change, the version of herself she had to rebuild without one word of explanation to anyone who loved her. I let myself believe the easiest story instead of trusting the woman I claimed to love, he said. That's on me, not just my mother. I should have gone looking for the truth instead of accepting the lie that hurt less. He didn't ask her to come back. He said only that he intended to prove, slowly and without pressure, that he had actually changed, and that forgiveness wasn't the same thing as reopening a door. Amara reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small, worn square of paper, folded so many times the creases had gone soft. Her old boarding pass. She set it on the bench beside the torn stub he still carried in his wallet. Neither of them said anything for a long moment. It was enough for now that both pieces of that old airport morning were finally sitting in the same light. Some silences are not weakness. They are the quiet, expensive price of loving someone more than your own comfort. Amara never told her story to defend herself. She told it, finally, only when the truth was ready to set 2 people free instead of tearing one more person down. Real love does not ask you to disappear, and real accountability does not arrive on its own timeline. It arrives the moment someone chooses honesty over comfort. If this story moved you tonight, tell me in the comments. Would you have stayed silent to protect someone you love, or spoken the truth and risked losing everything? This has been another story from Empire City Romance Stories, where every silence eventually finds its voice. Subscribe, turn on notifications, like this video, and come back for the next story, because in this city, the truth always finds its way home.